Hi guys, welcome to your 1.5 notes on adding and subtracting real numbers. By the end of the day, you will be able to find sums and differences of real numbers, sums being adding and differences subtracting. So for our first example, we're going to use a number line to add and subtract. Well, actually, just to add, because subtraction is a lie, but we'll talk about that later. So what I mean by using a number line is you start out with your first number and you put it on the number line. So 3 is right here. And then to add is you take that many steps. So we're going to add 5 steps. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. Gives you 8. So 3 plus 5 is 8. Super. Now to add a negative number, you just walk in the opposite direction. We still start at 3, and then we're going to take 5 steps backwards. So you go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2. Following that same pattern, go ahead and complete C and D. Rather, pause the video, do C and D. Okay, you should end up with negative 3 plus 5 is 2, and negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. Go ahead and look at the extra explanation video for more help on these examples. So you'll notice that when we go backwards, we have this big idea right here, and our big idea of going backwards is that adding a negative number is the same thing as subtracting that number. So 3 plus negative 5 is the same thing as 3 minus 5. To explain why that makes sense, I'm going to introduce something to you called an absolute value. The absolute value of a number is how much it's absolutely worth. No, just kidding. Absolute value, if there's one thing you think about with absolute value, think distance, how far you'll go. So the absolute value of that number is its distance away from 0. For example, 2, this number 2, its distance from 0 is, wrong, blue, 1, 2. The absolute value of 2 is 2. And then we can also go in the opposite direction. Negative 2 is still 1, 2 units away. So the absolute value of negative 2 is still 2. So you notice that absolute value is always positive. We denote absolute value. We mark absolute value with these brackets right here, these 2 up and down liney guys. So an absolute value looks like this. So it's always, always positive. Now this is going to come in handy because I'm going to talk about it a lot when we explain things. So we have 4 rules of adding and subtracting numbers. The first case, let's use brown. Sure. So this is like case number 1. Is if we have 2 numbers with the same sign, that is, are they both positive or are they both negative? Then we add their absolute values up. We keep the same sign as what we added. For example, we have negative 4 plus negative 2. They have the same sign. They are both negative. Negative 4 plus negative 2. To find out what we have, we're going to add their absolute values. The absolute value of, whoops, I got ahead of myself. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4, and the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. Now that we add their absolute values, that will give us 6, but the sum has the same sign as the add-ins. So because they're both negative, we need to add a negative and then put the absolute value, 6. So negative 4 plus negative 2 is negative 6. And our next example is if we have 2 numbers with different signs. Again, sign is it positive or negative? Then we're going to subtract their absolute values. That is the big one and then the small one. And then the result, the sum, is going to have the same sign as the addend with the largest absolute value. So for example, if we had two numbers with different signs, like 4 and -1, we've got a positive 4 and we've got a -1. We're going to subtract their absolute values from each other. That is 4 minus 1 is 3. So our answer is going to be a 3. Is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative? Well, since the absolute value of 4 is 4 and the absolute value of -1 is 1, 4 is bigger, so it's still going to be positive. If, however, we had a different example, let's say we had -4 plus 1. We still subtract because they have different signs. So we have 4 minus 1 is 3, so our answer will be a 3. But this time, because 4 is bigger than 1, it's going to be negative. So this gives us a -3. Using these rules, go ahead and try your hand at example 2. Pause the video, do your best, and check your answers. All right, -12 plus 7 is -5. -18 plus -2 is -20. -4.8 plus 9.5 is a positive 4.7. And finally, 3/4 plus a -5/6 is equal to -1/12. Oh boy. If you have any questions, please see our extra explanation video, and I will show you each little step. That is, if you got one wrong, check out our explanation video. Now, those were helpful for addition. We have a key term here that will help us with subtraction. So we've been talking about distance. We've been talking about distance from 0 with absolute value. So if we have two numbers with the same distance from 0, that is, they have the same absolute value, but when they're in opposite directions, we call them, are you ready for this? Opposites. Ha! Right? So if we have this number line, and I probably should have drawn this ahead of time, but here we go. We have 0 in the middle, and we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3 on this side, 1, 2, -3 on this side. These are both 3 away from 0. Whoa. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. They have a distance from 0, that's 3. But they are in opposite directions. 3 is positive, -3 is negative. So these are opposites because -3 plus 3 equals 0. They're opposite. Another set of opposites could be like -1/2 and a positive 1/2. They're both half of a unit away from 0, and -1/2 plus a positive 1/2 is equal to 0. They cancel out because they're opposites. That gets me ahead of the game to the inverse property of addition, that for every real number, no matter what your real number is, there's an additive inverse. When we say additive inverse, it's the same as your opposite. So additive inverse, -a, is always the opposite, such that a plus -a equals 0. And these are our examples down here. Cool, huh? So remember at the very beginning of this lesson when I was talking about subtraction and I said, you know what, we're not actually going to subtract because subtraction is a lie? I meant it. There's no such thing as subtraction, because subtraction is just adding the opposite. So instead of subtracting, we are going to add the opposite of a number. That is, if we have a minus b, that's the same thing as a plus negative b. So if we have, for example, 4 minus 2, that's the same thing as 4 plus negative 2. Oh, and we know how to add a positive number and a negative number. We went over that up here. Different signs, cool. So to find each, scroll all the way down. For example 3, you're gonna find each difference, which means we're not actually gonna subtract. Remember, we want to add the opposite. So I'm gonna set these up for you and then I'm gonna let you go. So remember, subtraction, we're gonna change all of our subtracting signs to adding the opposite. So this is plus and then make this a negative. But it's already negative, so that'll actually become positive. So this is the same thing as negative 8 plus a positive 13. And here, remember, subtraction is a lie. We're going to add the opposite. So that's the same thing as 3.5 plus negative 12.4. And then finally here, this subtraction is a lie. We're going to change it to adding the opposite. So 9 plus negative 9. See what that comes out to. Okay, you should have gotten that negative 8 minus negative 13 is 5. And then 3.5 minus 12.4 is negative 8.9. Finally, 9 minus 9 is 0. Yay. Okay, I have a shortcut here, a nice summary of our whole lesson right here. So this is our whole lesson summary. And we like summaries. They're nice and helpful, so you should keep this close and love it. Okay, so if we're going to add two numbers together, first we check, do they have the same sign? And remember, sign means positive or negative. And if they have the same sign, then all we do is we add them up together and we keep the sign. So if they're both negative, add them and make it negative. If they're both positive, add them and keep it positive. Always keep it positive, guys. You're doing great. But if they have a different sign, then we will subtract. So subtract the big one, or we'll start with the big one, subtract the small one from the big one, and then keep the sign of the number with the absolute, with the largest absolute value. You're like, this is great, Miss Van Dyke, and it's kind of abstract. When are we gonna use this in real life? Well, I will tell you. Let's say you, like Michaela, love to swim, you're going in the ocean, and you're gonna go diving. So Michaela's gonna go scuba diving to check out a reef. As she explores, she dives down 25 feet. I'm gonna have red be down. She goes down 25 feet to photograph some brain coral she sees, and then she'll rise up 16 feet to travel over a ridge. And after that, she'll dive down again. She dives 15 feet to survey the base of the reef. After she's checked out that base of the reef, then she rises up 29 feet and she sees a cavern, which is like a cave. So how deep is the cavern relative to sea level? So for those of you who, like me, like to visualize things, let's draw this out a little bit. So here we are, we're at sea level. We can say sea level is like 0 feet. So Michaela starts out at sea level. Cool, yay, good job. She jumps out of the boat, and then she dives down 25 feet. So we're gonna represent that with like a red arrow. She goes down 25. So she would be at like negative 25 feet. She's 25 feet below sea level. Then after that, from there, she goes up 16 feet. So she rises up 16 feet. To get over a ridge, cool, and then she goes down 47 feet from there. She goes so down she gets to the other page. I'm just kidding. All right. She goes down 47 feet. Wow. And then after she dives down to the floor, she goes up to see the cavern. And from there she went up 29 feet. Now, this is not to scale, so don't judge me. And thank you for not judging my artistic skills. But there we go. Okay. Now, to represent this, we're going to represent each number as adding or subtracting. So her first move was minus 25. And then she went up 16. And from there, down 47. And then up 29. And your goal is to find her final height, depth. You know, how far is she below sea level? So go ahead and add those, pause the video, add those numbers up, and check back when you have your answer. Okay, after adding all those numbers up, you should have negative 27, which means that she is 27 feet below sea level. I hope it was a great dive, Michaela. All right, so that's our lesson. Go ahead and summarize the most important thing to remember from this lesson. Give me a question that you have or something you wonder about, and then invent a quiz question. I hope you have a great time on your homework. Remember, if you need further explanation to any of these examples, check out our extra explanation video. Have a great day.